Basically, it was a very large earthquake that happened in Manhattan in the future that basically splits the island in two. And I hope I'm wrong. When I do future viewing and it's a negative viewing or something bad happening, I hope I'm wrong. And I don't have any investment in being right because I don't feel, that's a good thing to do. But I hope I'm wrong. But I report what I perceive.
Have you ever met other people that saw something similar who were remote viewers?
Right, after the fact. I haven't met and talked to them, but the taskers, when I sent them all my information, said, oh, this is what Joe McMonigal had viewed, and another remote viewer, and another psychic, and, it matches what they perceived. I've never actually seen their data. And then I found a magazine, the New York magazine. It wasn't the New Yorker, but New York magazine. And there was an article in there saying, not if, but when, the next big one in the Big Apple, and lots of information about fault lines and the potential for a big one in the Big Apple. Then it happened at night, it's dark. Of course, you've got all the underground rail lines, you've got traffic, you've got water lines, gas lines, a lot of utilities that traverse Manhattan. And then, the possibility of, how do you pick up all those people that are in that devastation? Because it doesn't just happen right in that center. It affects the whole island and part of the coastline too. So it was pretty traumatic.
Now, that was in 1992. For it to be within 20 years, that would be up to 2012. When you do a task like this, what do? You put down in the task that you are looking to identify something within the next 20 years, and then you're plugging into that timeline, correct?
No, it's done the opposite way.
Okay.
It's an open-ended search. And then after the fact, it's a question of, well, when is this going to happen?
Okay.
I think that's the question after the fact that the taskers had asked me. And that is very nebulous because there are ways within different protocols to look at timelines.
Right.
As we did a little bit of in the class.
Yeah, that's what I thought was so interesting.
Yeah, but I didn't do timelines for that particular viewing.
Right.
It's just off the top of my head, the gut feeling of when it might be.
Do you think that anybody would even be open to preparing? Is there a way to prepare for such a thing?
What I put in the book were some things that were going to happen beforehand. For example, there would be escapes of gas. There would be aerial lights, which are seismic, that are precursors to earthquakes. So just to be aware of the events that happen before earthquakes, and if those start happening, get to higher ground.
And I want to talk about another thing that really upset me. I want to talk about Melvin Pruitt, and I'd like to talk about your RV work of 2030, this mass exodus from the Northern Hemisphere. I think that there are a lot of people that are now receptive that maybe wouldn't have been receptive in 1987 when you remote viewed it. Can you talk about it?
What I perceived, and this again was an individual that gave me the tasking, and I had the first look that I took was I went to various Northern Hemisphere cities and found them empty. I'm going, what on earth has been happening here? And then I looked again and I found that what I perceived was that the atmosphere around that particular time had dramatically declined. Everybody thought the atmosphere was has been improving, but it suddenly deteriorates for some reason. Now, we've seen indications of this with the Icelandic volcanoes. It could be on a par with something like that in the future, but the atmosphere just suddenly deteriorates, and there's an exodus of people from the northern hemispheres down to the Mediterranean regions. And that lasts for about 50 years. The atmosphere starts clearing, and people start drifting back. Some people don't. They stay, they acclimatize. You can imagine over 50 years, people intermarry. They like the lifestyle where they are, and they stay. But then some people start drifting back up to the northern hemispheres.
When you first saw that, how did you feel?
Not as horrific as the Manhattan quake, which was a very acute shock. But it was, again, I hope I'm wrong, but it seemed pretty definite. It seemed like this was something that was going to happen.
You said it's dramatic and unexpected. When you talk about Exodus, that's huge. It's huge.
Yes, it is.
And we're not that far away. We're in 2011. That doesn't leave us many years, 19 years, right?
Well, I feel it's going to happen before that.
Really?
I just have that gut feeling, yeah.
Wow. That's a huge, huge thing. Do you think that there's anything that can be done to stop it?
Well, there's always the free will. But then, if something's going to happen that's natural, for example, on a par of the Icelandic volcanoes,
yes,
then there's not much people can do. Just be aware, be flexible, be aware of your environment, adapt to what the environment's doing. If you don't like where you are and the atmosphere changes, then it's going to be a natural move for people to go to an area where they can breathe. And it's not the end of the world.
You talk about people moving to equatorial countries.
I saw them moving to places like the Mediterranean islands and the
Mallorca, Corfu.
Right,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Around that area, that would seem to be like the two of the main places. But of course, those islands aren't going to hold everybody.
No.
From the northern hemisphere. So there'll be some distribution around those areas.
You said one of the biggest concerns would be food.
Well, yeah, because, imagine the trek, because there will be some transportation, but that's going to be a long trek, a long journey to get down there. People are going to die. But people will survive, and people will have to adapt. There will have to be new lifestyles, people living in groups rather than independently as isolated nuclear, small families.
When I invited Lynn Buchanan on as our guest, I asked him what did he sense and see by 2020. He said that he saw us returning to an agrarian society. It's pretty stunning because those that are walking around with iPads and iPhones and everything is electronic and life revolves around your cell phone, once you're hooked into that, you cannot imagine all that going away. Or
particularly young people. That's all they've known. They've grown up with cell phones and iPods and iPads now, and that's their life. They're in the electronic age.
Do you remember Melvin Pruitt?
The name rings a bell, but I'm not quite sure.
He's a physicist that got a patent on an air scrubbing technology.
Oh, right.
That gets rid of smog, like a 600-foot cylindrical technology that scrubs the smog.
Right. That was the feedback I received after 8 years. I had done a viewing way back in 1988, 89, and what I was tasked with was what technology can be discovered or invented that can clear ozone from the atmosphere, from our immediate atmosphere. And I saw these large chimney-type devices that scrubbed the air, scrubbed all the dirty ozone out, and then lofted it up to where it was needed, and put it aside because I didn't see anything happening, just kept it in my files until 8 years later I was on a plane and I opened up an airline magazine, and there was this article about Pruitt scrubbing towers.
How interesting.
And it was like, aha, there's my feedback.
Let's talk about the rings of Saturn. That was very, very interesting. It would seem ordinarily to be a way out there type of task but I want you to talk about your remote viewing work on the rings of Saturn. How did it start? What were you looking for? What happened?